It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Yo, how are you guys doing this evening? I hope you all are doing well. Hopefully you guys are healthy. I know there's a lot of craziness going around with all the crazy sickness stuff and everything. Myself and my family, cross our fingers, we're doing good. Knock on, I don't think there's any real wood in my office. It's all the fake IKEA crap. But you know, the best we can do is try to stay alive. That's how, you know, I'm happy when I wake up, I think. So it's all good. As usual, guys, hope you guys are doing well. I think I already said that. I've got a list of things I want to talk about, and I want to be able to try to get to your guys' questions too. Okay, remember, if I pinned a comment at the top of the comments, if you guys have a question, put it in the chat, put it in caps lock, okay? If I don't get to it, you can keep reposting it until myself or one of the moderators tells you to stop. If I miss your question, you can feel free to send me an email at hvacrvideos@gmail.com. You guys know the drill. It's pretty easy, okay? Sometimes these live streams go so busy that I can't get to your guys' questions, okay? And I'm not specifically ignoring anybody. It's just life happens, okay? It's funny because even I was in someone's live chat recently, Roger Wakefield, the plumbing dude. I was in his live stream today, and I like posted a comment, and it's like, oh, you know, it goes by and I don't think he sees it. But I realize that, you know, people get frustrated in my chat too. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on, but it is what it is. We have to remember that, you know, I'm not staring at the chat. I'm specifically looking at the camera, and I'm looking at a list of things. And then every once in a while I look down at the chat. And so people can ask a question, and then 3 minutes goes by and that question's gone. I can't see it anymore. So just keep reposting it and be patient. If I miss your question, feel free to send me an email. Like I said, I have a bunch of questions that are actually from emails that I'm going to answer tonight. And then again, we'll try to get to the chat. So, oh, okay. Dave K, that is a great point. Dave K says that there's a service bulletin on York equipment. You have to check the set screws to the blower wheels. They are coming from the factory, not tight. I've seen that on Lennox. I've seen that on Carrier. I've seen that on just about every manufacturer. To be honest with you, nobody pays for proper commissioning, right? Okay, especially in light commercial, nobody pays for a proper commissioning. In the heavy industrial, they probably get stuff commissioned. But during the commissioning process, you're actually supposed to go through, if you're a factory tech, a lot of times they'll have you go through and double check everything. And then they want you to report back to the factory when you're commissioning and finding issues so that way they can try to address them. Whether or not they're actually going to do it, I don't know. But I have seen that. I've seen blower pulleys or motor pulleys spin undone, and you open up the AC that was just installed last week, and it's like the pulley's laying there in pieces, you know, and the belt's next to the blower assembly. Like, I've seen it, okay? So manufacturers do drop the ball occasionally. And like I said, I mean, in a perfect world, we properly commission the equipment and we check the tightness of everything. But I mean, at what point do you rebuild the AC? You know, like, I understand commissioning, but at the same time, as a technician, for real, like, I got to go and check every screw, you know, like, ugh, seems kind of silly, but hey, it's the life that we live. How are you guys out? I'd like to know in the chat, how are you guys doing? Do you guys have a lot of parts back ordered? Are you noticing parts delivery times like significantly delayed? Because I am. I order a lot of my OEM refrigeration parts from Partstown. First off, I've noticed the shipping prices, oh my gosh, going through the roof. But I also have a feeling that has to do with all the acquisitions and mergers that Partstown has done. They basically become one of the biggest parts distributors. And so I kind of feel like they know their stuff doesn't stink and they can kind of start raising their prices. At the same time, I know that shipping rates are going up, but some of the prices, you know, it's insane. What used to cost me, because I used to have like negotiated deals with Partstown where I'd get second day air for the price of regular ground, and regular ground used to cost like $9 at the most. Regular ground today is anywhere from $15 to $25. It's crazy, but I'm not blaming Partstown completely. I mean, you know, it is what it is, but I'm noticing a lot of delays. I've got OEM condenser fan motors on back order and everything. It's definitely, prices are going up, all that stuff. So let's see what the chat has to say here. Major quality issues from Heatcraft and Bone. I can agree with that one a little bit, Ethan. I mean, it kind of goes across to every manufacturer. Let's see. What is the weirdest thing I've pulled out of a system? Zachary Windsor. It was one of my early videos. I pulled a plastic shipping cap out of the suction service valve of a compressor. It was wedged in the suction service valve, and that compressor had been running for a couple years. I believe the video was titled Late Night Walk-in Freezer Repair or something like that, and I changed a compressor overnight. And as I was like pulling the compressor apart, I looked inside one of the valves while it's still connected to the system, and there was a giant red cap in there that I pulled out that had just been getting mangled in the system by refrigerant. That was a pretty interesting one to pull out of there. Let's see what else. Saying part back order is destroying us. You're a machinist and getting basic parts. It would take 1 day, now taking 3 weeks or more. It's getting hard to get. Yeah, definitely, for real. Waiting 6 weeks for a condenser fan motor. Don't know what's special about it since they couldn't cross-reference it. I've been waiting for like almost 2 months now, month and a half now, for a Train like 1 horsepower ECM condenser fan motor. And I've been like asking Train to cross it over because it's one of their space shuttle units. It was in my recent video, I said it. It's one of those units that has a variable speed compressor, VFDs on the indoor blower motor. It's dehumidification. It's got all this fancy stuff, microchannel condensers. It's like a dang space shuttle. It has more circuit boards than I've ever seen in an air conditioner. It has a bad condenser fan motor, and the condenser's just getting ruined with water running on it right now. And it's like, I don't know what else to tell them, because they only have, there's no redundancy built into these restaurants anymore. So they only have 2 dining room ACs, one for the dining room, one for the bar. And the bar unit's like an 18-ton. And, you know, they need that running or the unit goes off on high head lockout. And it's like, what do you do? You know, yeah, you know, people have asked me in my comments, why didn't I rig up a water filter and all this stuff? It's because you don't plan on stuff being there that long. And customers oftentimes don't want to pay for all that fancy stuff. But yet they're going to probably have to buy a condenser when this is all said and done. Let's see what else we got in here. 3 to 4 weeks to get an Emerson compressor. Really? See, I haven't seen a compressor issue yet, at least, but I haven't been changing a lot of compressors. So that's an interesting one. I haven't heard that one yet. Let's see what else we got. Let's see. Hamilton says his plumber buddy says his parts warehouse said once they are out of PEX fittings, they aren't getting any more until after the first of the year. No clue if that's true or not. That's pretty crazy. Yeah, that's pretty nuts right now. Let's see. Do I do residential air conditioning? No, I do not. Okay, why would a compressor lockout board be bypassed? Would there be any pros or cons to bypassing them? Temporal engineering. No, it wouldn't be a good idea to bypass a compressor lockout board. The purpose of okay, so in general, a compressor lockout board, let's just use a Carrier package unit, okay, that has a compressor lockout board. What it is the safety controls, the high pressure, the low pressure, and the freeze thermostat are wired through the compressor lockout board. And if any one of those opens, you know, on system operation, they're typically all auto reset. The compressor lockout board locks the system out so that way it doesn't short cycle on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off until it burns out the compressor. So unless serious system modifications are made, you don't want to bypass a compressor lockout board, okay? I mean, it's not a good idea anyways, but I'm not saying I've never done it, okay? But you'd have to make some serious system modifications, go to manual reset pressure controls for the high side, but it's still good to have it on the low side, because if you have a plugged up filter dryer or something like that, you know, it's going to turn off and then turn back on and go back and forth. Now, those compressor lockout boards also will monitor one leg of current for the compressor. And even if the high pressure and the low pressure are correct, the controls, and the compressor tries to start, if it doesn't sense current across one of those wires, it'll actually lock out the system too. So those lockout boards are rather simple to use once you understand them, and they serve a really good purpose. You could also do the same with some relays and stuff. You could rig it up and do some interesting stuff and kind of make your own lockout in a way. But that's a whole another day, another problem. So let's see. Oh, yes, Jason Johnson, when I pulled the brush out and called it a poop stick. That was, for the longest time, one of my most popular videos, because like a bunch of weird YouTube and internet like threads picked up on that video and started sharing it and stuff. But that was an interesting one. Yeah, when you stick those brushes up into the ice machine and pull it out, and you see like it creates a poop stick, and it's nasty. That is pretty gross. That was a pretty funny one. Do I specialize in multi-circuit rack systems, air and or water cooled? I don't know if I specialize. What I work on is light commercial refrigeration and air conditioning. I specialize in restaurant refrigeration and air conditioning. So I do work on some light commercial stuff, but I would say air conditioning wise, I don't work on anything bigger than 30 tons. Refrigeration wise, typically not anything bigger than 5 horsepower condensing units. I don't do food storage, you know, for like giant industrial stuff. I don't do any of that, and I do not do any residential work. So, but I do work on a lot of multi-circuited, multiplexed refrigeration racks and stuff like that. But I don't do any racks that have, you know, unloaders and you know, parallel rack systems. I don't do any of that stuff. That's all supermarket fancy stuff. All right, 40-day delay on 80/20 aluminum extrusion. Also have packages stuck in Illinois for 1.5 weeks. That's crazy. That is nuts where it's all happening. What are my opinions? AC systems where all the lines, condensers, and evaps are aluminum. Well, I'm apprehensive about aluminum stuff just because of the nightmares that I've heard from other people, but I have to be completely honest with you. I personally have not had any problems with aluminum evaporators, aluminum condensers. You know, I take that back. I have had some glass tinder refrigeration systems that have aluminum evaporators, and yes, those did have a lot of refrigerant leaks, but it's not necessarily the evaporator. It's the solder that they're using to connect the aluminum to the copper. And there was constantly leaks at it. So whenever I would replace those, glass tinder has since gone to a standard copper tube and fin condenser because of all the problems that they had on that, and evaporator, I should say. But I mean, I really don't have a huge preference. I've just heard a lot of bad stuff about aluminum condensers or microchannel condensers, but I don't, you know, have too many issues with them. So, all right. I want to start off by talking about the channel, okay? The channel in general, HVACR videos. I've been getting a lot of questions and a lot of comments, and while I appreciate all the feedback, I just kind of want to address this on a channel level, so that way everybody can hear that's in here. Okay. A lot of people have been emailing me asking me to do collaborations with people. Hey, how come you don't work with this person? Do a video with this person, this guy, this guy. Okay. First and foremost, I want to explain something to you. I treat this channel different than most other people, and I'm not judging any other YouTubers or anything like that. I just have my own style that I run this channel. Honestly, I don't want to put a crap ton of effort into this channel. I do not want this whole videos thing that I do to become a pain in my butt. And there's times that it has become a pain in my butt, but I try to get back and I try not to focus too much attention on this channel. Hence why it hasn't grown, or I haven't done any crazy things or created classes or anything like that. Not judging anybody. That's amazing that people have time to do that. But I'm trying to run a business first and foremost, my refrigeration and air conditioning company, trying to manage and pay attention to my family. And then I make videos for my employees, and I made them public for you guys. And hence this channel has been created. Okay. So as far as collaborations go, I'm not saying I'm not interested in doing collaborations with other content creators, because I'm actually in talks of doing some, but I'm not necessarily doing collaborations to grow my channel. That's not what I'm looking for, okay? And while I appreciate any growth, I want the growth to be natural, okay? I don't want to just pound on this. I'm not building this to sell it or anything like that. I'm just having fun with it. And, you know, I do make a little bit of money from it, and it's all a bonus and a benefit, but I do not do it for that reason, okay? And I think that might be reflected in my style. I kind of say what I want. I do have some channel sponsors and stuff, but they work with me and appreciate the way that I do my stuff. And that's why I love Sporlin and Refrigeration Technologies, for the way that they let me do my thing, right? Neither of them is demanding. All of them are cool. You know, they appreciate any mentions I give, and it's just, it is what it is. They want to be part of the community. Okay. So, again, I appreciate all the feedback from you guys in the emails, and please continue to send them, because maybe you can tell me about someone, but I have no interest in doing a collaboration that's simply for me to go on a video with another content creator to just say how much we like each other and all that stuff. And I'm not judging anybody else for doing that, but that's not my style. Okay. So there is some future collaborations coming down the pipeline, but they are going to be useful, right? So stay tuned, because I'm potentially going to be doing something with my buddy Trevor Matthews. Okay. Trevor Matthews works for Copeland Emerson up in Canada, and he has, you know, he's a cool dude. So just stay tuned. I'm not going to talk too much more about that, but that's a useful thing, because you know what? Maybe I can help to grow his channel, right? And then he can give me some official Copeland feedback on what I showed in my video and that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm interested in. But I'm not interested in just doing something with someone just to give me more exposure. That's not my style, okay? And again, I'm not judging anybody for that, but I felt like I needed to address that, because I get a crap ton of emails and comments about it, okay? So we're done with that, and let's move on. Let me look at the chat and see what I'm missing here. Gabe's Reef Tampa, thank you so very much for that super chat. That is much appreciated. Again, thank you very much for all the support from everybody. Guys, I've said it a million times. I'll say it again. The easiest way to support this channel is simply watch the videos from beginning to end without skipping through anything. You catch my drift? Super easy, okay? Of course, there is people that have chosen to support the channel via Patreon, via YouTube channel memberships, via super chats, super stickers, PayPal, all that different stuff. You can go to my website, hvacrvideos.com. We got merchandise available, but the easiest way is simply just watch the videos from start to finish. Okay, guys? All right, let's move on to the next thing. Let's see. Has anyone else been having issues getting Viper cleaner packs? None out there in upstate New York. I have not heard about any shortages yet, Heed 120. But that's very interesting. You may want to reach out to Refrigeration Technologies. If you go to their website, I'm sure they've got to contact me or something like that, and just reach out and just ask them, hey, my supply house is having a hard time. Is this on your end, or is this on the supply house's end? Maybe there is a shortage. I don't know. If I remember, I'll try to reach out myself, but I haven't heard anything as of yet. Right on, 716 Appliance Guy. All right, let's see what else we got in here. All right, I answered that one. How long has the company stayed in business, and do I still work on freezers when they're broken? Patchy Pirates, the Potty, the Parrot, and Potty the Parrot. That's an interesting name. That's rather long. So how long has my company been in business? So my dad started the company in 1990. 91, 1990, right in there, 90, 91. I came to work. I grew up working with my father. I came to work for him full time in 2001 and became part owner. And we run the company together now. My dad is not in the field anymore, so we have been in business for a very long time. We have continued to have a lot of the same customers from the very beginning and have branched off into new customers. But yeah, so we're doing good. I wouldn't say we're a extremely successful business. We're struggling just like everybody else. We have flaws just like everybody else. The best we can do is try our best to give the customers the best service possible that we can give them. That's all that we do. Late night HVAC. Thank you so much for that super chat, man. I really, really appreciate it. Right on, dude. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get to my list of things to talk about. Andrew had asked me about getting into the trade, and he was curious what the requirements are here in the United States. Andrew is from Canada. Okay. In Canada, I know they have some requirements. So it depends on what state you're in. Scott, HVAC rookie, thanks so much for that super chat, bud. That is awesome. I really appreciate you, man. You constantly help out this channel. You're a man, dude. Oh yeah. Yeah. Look at that. Look at that. Get a haircut. I ain't getting no haircut, man. I'm going to keep this hair long. I told my daughter I'm going to grow it so she can give me a man bun. So guaranteed I will have a man bun soon. My daughter keeps coming in my bedroom every night and she's like curling it up in the back. So I told her I'll have a man bun for her. Andrew is asking about getting in the trade. He's from Canada. So every state and is going to have different requirements. Okay. California does not really have any requirements to be an HVAC service technician. The only thing they require is that you have a Section 608 certification. That's actually a federal requirement by the Environmental Protection Agency. Everybody has to have that in the United States. Other than that, you do not have to have any kind of licensing and or proper apprenticeship to be a technician here in California. If you want to open a business, you do have to meet some certain criteria, but it's really not that hard to open a business. I kind of wish that they would require people be certified in some way or another. But then again, too, just like most other certifications, when certifications first come out, majority of them, they find that they're too difficult, so they end up dumbing them down. Originally, I'd heard some rumors. I don't know if this is 100% true, but I did hear some rumors that in the very beginning, like the NATE certification, when they were exploring NATE, trying to decide what it was called. Again, this is rumors. Do not know this to be fact, but I heard that they were kind of shopping out, finding people, and they had reached out to some organizations to get testing material written. And I had heard that the testing material basically was too difficult and nobody was going to be able to pass it. So they basically dumbed it down to where most people can pass it if you've been in the industry for so long. Okay. I know some people don't, but it is what it is. So a lot of times I find us, even though we set certification goals, oftentimes there's ways to get around those certifications. So I don't know the answer to that question. I really do wish that we had more certification requirements. But then again, what I was pointing out is I don't know if we would just make a reason to get around that requirement, though. So I don't know. Anyways, I'm just rambling at that point. I made a video recently where I had a Carrier package unit and I had a plugged up metering device. Couple questions about that metering device. Number one, probably the number one question, why did I not convert that to an expansion valve system? And the reason why I did not is because, to my knowledge, there is not an OEM recommended kit to compare or to convert that to an expansion valve kit. Okay. Carrier does not make it, to the best of my knowledge. So that's the main reason why I did not convert that system over to an expansion valve. Now, I certainly thought about it. I certainly thought about contacting my partners over at Sporlan, asking them to help me with the distributor and all that stuff. But you have to remember to do it properly. Like, some people have sent me emails and I know people have done it and it works, and that's fine. But I have to make my systems serviceable by my own service technicians. They can't be Frankenstein systems that, kind of operate correct. Like, it has to be cookie cutter. When you run a business with employees, the more field modifications you do to systems, the more difficult it is for another service technician to walk behind you and quickly and easily diagnose that system. Okay. I find myself doing that a lot with a lot of different things. I try to use OEM parts all the time. And it's simply because I want to make it as easy as possible for my own service technicians to diagnose and repair systems. And I don't want them to have to go full Einstein to try to figure things out. I've certainly done some of that in my career. But when you typically start you know, field modifying systems, there's a lot of, okay, well, this isn't going to work perfect, but it's okay, you know, and it just makes it harder and harder for a technician down the line. So I have to think ease of service for the next guy. So trying to convert systems without having a factory recommendation, that makes it a little bit difficult. Okay. So that's why I don't try to convert my systems over to expansion valves and why I put in a new evaporator. Now, the next most popular question, why the heck in that video did we not just change out the AC? It seems so stupid that we put all that money into that system. And I agree, it was pretty silly that we put that much money into that system. Bottom line, I gave my customer a quote to repair it, and I gave my customer a quote to replace it, and they chose to repair it. Okay? The quote to repair it was cheaper than the quote to replace it. And I have this feeling and I have this opinion of this, okay? These customers, as much as I would like them to think about tomorrow, they're only worried about today, okay? All these crazy times and all this craziness going on, in my opinion, these customers are taking it day by day. And if they look at the big picture and think about tomorrow and think about all this different stuff, I have a feeling they'll spend more money than they have in their reserves right now. And they may not have that money when they need it again if something happens, if they start shutting down things again and stuff like that. Okay, so I have a feeling these customers are just working day by day, and that's why they're not doing these major capital improvements. Okay, I've heard of entire restaurant chains cutting back on spending and doing different things like that. So my restaurants are spending money hand over fist right now, but they're not replacing equipment as much as they have in the past. Okay. So it's basically put in their hands. I give them all the options and I let them make the decisions. And of course, when you know, I quoted this job and I said, here's the replacement, here's the repair, and they said, repair it. And are you sure? Like, this is a lot of money and who knows if there's going to be a problem? And they're like, yeah, just repair it. Just, you know, we'll deal with whatever issues come up later on down the line. So again, I'm just here to do what they ask me to do and I'm doing it. Okay. So let me answer that one. Kevin had asked me a question about replacing a TXV on the system. This is an interesting question. So the TXV manufacturer, this was a split system air conditioner. The TXV manufacturer told him that they want to see 10 degrees subcooling at the expansion valve, okay, at the liquid line going to the expansion valve, but the equipment manufacturer says that they want to see 8 degrees at the outlet of the condenser outside. So Kevin was kind of curious what he should do, okay? So first and foremost, Kevin, what I'm going to recommend is that if you're using the OEM recommended expansion valve, that you follow what the manufacturer of the equipment says to do so. So if it's Carrier, if it's Lennox, if it's whoever, lean on what the manufacturer of the equipment says, okay? I've said it many times. A lot of these customers the manufacturers beat to the tune of their own drum, and they do weird things that are OEM specific and apply only to their equipment, okay? So if you're working on Lennox package units, they don't recommend that you use subcooling as a charging metric with TXVs. They want you to use the approach temperature. It's an ass backwards way of doing subcooling, but it does make a difference, okay? So everybody has their own little way that they want you to do things. Now, the idea of having 10 degrees of subcooling at the liquid line going to the expansion valve is to ensure that you have absolutely no flash gas in that line and you have a solid column of liquid going to the expansion valve. In that case, what I would highly recommend you doing, and especially if you're worried about it, is putting a sight glass out at the condenser, putting a sight glass right at the inlet of the expansion valve, and that way you're 100% sure. Remember that it doesn't, as far as the expansion valve goes, the expansion valve just needs to see subcooling, okay? If you have subcooling, you have a solid column of liquid, okay? But if you're only measuring out at the condenser, there could be a point going into the expansion valve that maybe there's a restriction or a pressure drop or something like that. Keep in mind too, long line set runs, improperly sized liquid lines, different things like that can cause the system to not work properly. Now, Kevin did get the system working, and what he actually did was went in the middle and found a happy medium between what the manufacturer wanted and what the TXV manufacturer wanted, and he says it's been operating fine, but he was just curious about my opinion. So my opinion is lean on the side of the manufacturer of the equipment, not necessarily the manufacturer of the component, okay? Let's see what else we got in here. Yeah, guys, if you could please smash the thumbs up button. It definitely helps out the stream. It looks like we have 368 people watching right now and 120 likes. You guys, this truly does help the algorithm and makes the algorithm happy when you guys get that like count up to the view count. So please smash the like button, guys, okay? I'm going to cross that one off my list, and then I'm going to go to the chat and see what I'm missing, okay? All right. Anybody else having trouble getting curbs built for package units? I haven't really had any issue with it, but I mean, I did have some curbs built a while back that took about a month and a half to get built, which did seem a little bit long, but I'm sure that they're just short on employees and everything, you know? All right, let's see. And probably having a hard time too getting materials, raw materials. Budgets are accounts, different department managers. The replacement budget is not the repair maintenance budget in a corporate environment. And that is very true, flip-flop tan lines. You know, corporations have all kinds of different stuff, okay? They have budgets that allot for, yeah, replacements. They have budgets that allot for repairs. And oftentimes they won't commingle those funds. So, you know, it's just how the corporation runs. And guys, trust me, I want to sell equipment. But if the customer doesn't want me to, then I'm just going to do, and to be honest with you, I make more money on service, but the equipment replacement solves headaches down the line because you get rid of this problematic equipment. But, you know, I just give the customer all the information and I let them make the decisions. You know, I'm just the guy in there making recommendations. Zach had asked me, what torch tips do I recommend him using when working in small refrigerators in the restaurants and stuff? Okay. So in my torch caddy, I carry an oxyacetylene torch caddy. I do not use any B tanks or anything like that, okay? When I do braze, I am brazing with 15% silphos, okay? That's 15% silver, and then it has other stuff in there, and it has phosphorus in it that acts as a fluxing compound. A lot of people will say, how come you don't put flux on your brazing rod? Well, because you don't have to, because silphos in its nature has flux built into it, essentially, okay? But it's not like one of those flux-coated rods. It's the phosphorus. I don't understand all the science. That's just what I've read and been told, okay? So as far as the torch tips that I use, okay, while I'm talking about the different solders, first off too, I use 15% silphos. I do not use the low temperature melting solders. I do not use Stay Silvate or anything like that. I've fixed too many leaks on that stuff and it makes it rather difficult for me. So I do 15% silphos or 56% silver solder. Those are the only two solders that I use, period. Okay. 45% works too, but I like the 56%. It's not that much more money. Now, when you do use the high silver content solders, the 56% silver solder, you do have to use a silver solder paste flux that goes on there. Okay. I like using the spool of silver solder. I personally don't like the flux-coated rods because I find that when they sit in the van for too long, the flux starts breaking off. Then it just becomes a problem when you're trying to braze it on. I like to use the paste flux in the little tub, you know, wipe it on there and call it a day. As far as which tips I use, I carry a range of tips. I have a 0 tip. I have a number 1 tip, which I don't use the number 1 very much. I usually use a 0, a number 2, or a 15 rosebud tip, okay? And those are the basic 3 that I use, the 0, the number 2, and the 15 rosebud tip. A question I get quite often, how do I know what the settings on my torch regulator should be when it comes to the brazing gases or the gases that I'm using for my oxyacetylene torch? And I will tell you to lean on the manufacturer of the tips, okay? So if you look on the back of the packaging of a number 0 tip, it actually tells you what the pressure settings need to be. If you have a rosebud tip, it tells you on the back of it, and the same for the number 2 tip, okay? So lean on the manufacturers, and they will tell you what you need to set your pressures at for your gases, okay? When I was in my recent video where I was fixing the evaporator in the package unit that had the plugged up metering device, right? And I was changing the whole evaporator. When I was soldering the drain line, I got a lot of questions. Why did I take my flux and wipe it on the solder when I was done soldering it? And that was an old trick I was taught by a plumber a long time ago to make your joints look pretty. Is if you take an acid brush, you have to be very careful. You dip it in the paste flux, and while the solder's still hot, just wipe the flux or wipe the solder with the flux. It'll smear the solder and make it look pretty. So if you have any drips or anything like that, it'll like wipe it around and just make it look better. Sometimes I get kind of crazy and I'll get in there and I'll sand them too. One of the important things that I'm going to tell you guys is if you use any of those paste fluxes, you need to wipe them off when you're done. So when you're done brazing, when you're done soldering, if you're using any kind of a flux, I highly suggest you take a wet towel, wipe everything off, and then dry the joint, because I've seen some of those fluxes go and start causing, actually I have a restaurant that I can think of right off the top of my head that when they opened that restaurant, the plumbers never cleaned off any of the flux, and I kid you not, almost every joint in that building started leaking. They would have pinhole leaks all the time, and every time you'd go there, you'd look at the plumbing line, because they would call me out thinking it was a roof leak, and I'd go out there and I'd look at it, and where the solder was at, it'd be all green, and then you could see just a pinhole water leak. And obviously someone didn't prep it right, didn't clean it right, and didn't clean off the flux. So always try to clean off that flux when you're all done, just to make sure that you get everything taken care of. How many service calls a day do I run? I get that question quite often too, and there's no number. I mean, it just depends. You know, today I went and did a service call that took me about an hour and a half first thing in the morning. And then I went and did another service call that took me the rest of the day. So today I got 2 service calls done. Tomorrow I might get 1. Maybe I'll get 3. Maybe I'll get 4. It really depends on how much time each call takes. Of course, you know, there's going to be times when we're super swamped and we have a million service calls that we literally just have to get it running, put the fire out, and then we'll come back and finish it later. But as much as possible, I like to try to finish the call if I can when I'm on site. That way I don't have to make a return visit. Return visits just waste my time. Now, sometimes it's necessary because you need parts or different things like that. But I do not have a quota that I have to meet. None of my service technicians have quota. They're allowed to take the time that it needs to give the customer the proper service and make sure that it's fixed correctly. Callbacks are a nightmare for me, so I hate callbacks. I'd rather my guys spend an extra half hour to an hour making sure everything is 100%, making sure it's working, watching it turn on and off 4 or 5 times before we leave, than for us to get a call back and find out something else is wrong, okay? So I do not have a specific amount of calls that I run in a normal day. I'm going to get to the chat and see what I got in here. Maximilian wants to know if I can explain Linux's approach method. Okay, Linux's approach method, it's not just Linux, they've just adopted it. From my understanding, they use the approach method on chillers too. So the approach method on a Linux unit or on a refrigeration system is simple as this. You take the outdoor entering ambient temperature that's entering the condenser, and you compare it, you find what the difference between the outdoor air temperature and the surface temperature of the liquid line leaving the condenser. So let's think about that. The outdoor air is being pulled into the condenser, right? And it's grabbing the heat from the refrigerant, rejecting it out the top of the condenser, okay? And then that refrigerant is being subcooled, okay? So the refrigerant gets subcooled, it condenses into a liquid, and it goes to the expansion valve, right? So when we measure the surface temperature of the liquid line, right, and then we compare the outdoor air temperature to the surface temperature, it's a very similar calculation than when we do subcooling. So let's do the math for subcooling. A subcooling calculation is the saturated temperature of the refrigerant in the condenser compared to the surface temperature of the liquid line. Okay, so that's why I call the approach method an ass backwards subcooling. Okay, because it's kind of the same, but it's not exactly the same. All right. Now, why does the manufacturer Linux use that exact method? I honestly don't know the answer to that, but I will tell you one thing. If you have a properly operating system, right, you've got good temperature splits, the feed pattern on the evaporator, you know, it's condensating equally across the evaporator, the expansion valves look good, you don't necessarily have to put your gauges on the system, right, and disturb the refrigerant pressures to check the approach temperature of the system. It's a non-invasive way to check the charge, okay? You look at all the vital signs, everything seems to be okay, then you measure the outdoor air temperature, and then using the same thermometer, you measure the surface temperature of the liquid line for that circuit, you calculate the approach temperature, and you look at what the manufacturer wants you to have as an approach temperature, and you can kind of check the charge without going too crazy. Now, if you're having system issues, of course, and approach temperature, even Linux says, is not very accurate if the system's severely undercharged or severely overcharged, but keep that in mind, okay? So hopefully that helps there, bud. All right. Let's see. I saw a question here, and what did I miss? Da, 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 da. Have I been affected by the labor shortage? I mean, kind of, but not really. I'm very finicky about hiring people anyways. So when I do hire technicians, it's a very long, intensive process before I actually hire someone. So, I mean, of course, I've noticed there's less applications, but on the flip side, I also have a little bit more of an advantage than some of the, let's say, the other service companies in my area, because I have this platform to recruit from. So I kind of get to cheat a little bit in that way. So I definitely got plenty of resumes when I went through my thing. And then I just hired, I went through and just decided who I wanted to hire. How do I convince a customer to pay to have the condenser coils split on the double row coils? I don't, okay? I do not have one single customer that pays for me to split the condensers on a normal routine PM. Therefore, we have to be proactive and bring that stuff up. When we're doing a routine PM, we can kind of pop the top a little bit, just look down in there, and if we notice the condenser is really dirty, then we'll bring it up to the customer and we'll have them create a work order so we can send 2 service technicians out there to pull the top on that unit and properly split it. And I realize that some people, I got an email last week saying you don't have to have 2 people to split those condensers. You can prop the top up with the corner post. You can, but the best way to do it is to lift that top off. I don't know if you guys notice on the carrier units, when you just prop up the top and you're doing it with one person, it actually folds the top. Like there's a fold there that never goes away, and it's just kind of wonky looking. So I prefer to pull the top whenever possible completely. Let's see what else we got in here. There you go. Rich, GT350R says Hvacr has a setting chart for their tips. Google Hvacr, acetylene, brazing, and cutting chart. That is exactly correct. And I've done some research about that too. And it's not just Hvacr. You can look at Harris. You can look at, or I don't know, some of those companies are all the same, but you can look at all the different companies. Just Google torch tip setting chart. Pay attention though, because Hvacr will have a setting for cutting tips, and they'll have a setting for a heating tip too. So keep that in mind. If we're brazing, I think technically we would be heating and not cutting. So just some food for thought. Let's see what else we got in here. What do we have? What am I missing? I'm looking at the chat right now. Right on, George Robles. That's cool. You made your 608. Awesome, bud. Congratulations. Funniest thing that's happened to me in the field. The funniest thing that has happened in the field. That is a good question. Embarrassing, like when I was really young and I was a teenager, or not a teenager, but like 20 years old or something. There was this girl that would always leave her phone number in my tool bucket, like because she wanted to go out or something. And I was like dating my soon-to-be wife at the time, so it was always awkward for me because I wasn't a very confident person. So like it was hard for me to like just straight up say I'm not interested. I was just kind of like, okay, So that was a little embarrassing for me. She kept leaving her number, and then like the manager finally asked me if I was single, and I was like, no, I'm not. It was weird. I blown out a drain one time. That was a funny one. I've talked about this before. It was like a fish reach-in that they kept shrimp and crap, and the drain was plugged up on it. And I was trying to blow out the drain with CO2. Don't use CO2 to blow out drains. I've since learned my lesson with that, but not because of this. But I was using CO2, and I finally got it to clear while the manager was standing right there with me, and it blew shrimp, raw shrimp all over both of us. The manager straight up left the restaurant and went to Mervin's. That's how old it was, how long ago it was, and bought new clothes and just came back. And I had to work in my filth for the rest of the day. That was pretty nasty. Let me see what else we got in here. Mike had asked me a question about which leak detector I recommend, the field piece or the inficon. All right, it really depends on what you're comfortable using, okay? So the 2 top-of-the-line leak detectors, the field piece, what is it? Shoot, I can't even think of the name of it right now. Is it DR80, DR58? DR85? Whatever the fancy field piece one is. I can't think of the number right now. I have that one, and then I also have the Inficon Stratus D-Tech Select, or Inficon Stratus, which is like an $800 leak detector. I find that both of them are pretty much equal, and they both work almost identical. The field piece is a lot cheaper, so you do the math, okay? I have the D-Tech Stratus. I'm a redundancy person, so I like carrying 2 leak detectors on my van. So I like having both of them. So if I can't find a leak, I bust out the other one and use that one too. And I mean, they both have been pretty darn equal. And I've seen some people say they've had quality issues with the Inficon Stratus or D-Tech Stratus or whatever it's called. I personally haven't. It's been working great for me. So I've had really good luck with the field piece and the Inficon. Now the Stratus has the cloud hunting mode, which the field piece has something similar, but not quite as the same. So if you want that digital readout with the cloud hunting mode, you can do that. But the field piece has a numeric readout. It's not a parts per million readout, but it's a numeric readout that allows you to kind of cloud hunt too. So you can walk into a big leak, adjust your sensitivity, and watch the numbers drop or grow as you get closer and closer to the leak. So you do the math on that one. Why the heck are you putting a super chat in here, Adam? You're not my daddy, apparently. Clearly, Adam is not my daddy with HVAC overtime. No, no, no. On the flip side, what Adam did remind me to do, if you guys did not already do it, you need to go check out the 100th episode of the Overtime Show. So the HVAC Overtime Show is a show that myself, my buddy Adam, my buddy Bill, and my buddy Joe do together. And we've been doing the show. I've been on it for at least like probably 80 plus episodes, and they had a couple like 20 something before me, but we just hit our 100th episode for the show in general. And Bill spent weeks going through every single episode and finding the funniest moments from every episode, and then made a giant video. Guys, I am not kidding with you. If you didn't already watch the video, and if you did watch it and you didn't know this, pay attention to me as I'm watching the video. So we're in the 4 corners if you watch the actual live video, okay? There's also a bloopers reel that doesn't show us, but if you watch the live show, I was being filmed, right, while I'm reacting, because none of us had seen this, and Bill did it all. I literally fell off my chair because I was laughing so hard. I laughed the entire time. It was hilarious. Bill did such a great job editing that show. So definitely go back and watch that. That's the HVAC Overtime 100th episode. Someone can post a link in the chat or something. That was great. How do you know if a DTC valve is working properly on a walk-in freezer compressor? Familia. What you want to do is actually reach out to the manufacturer Copeland. Go to the Copeland, gosh, I wish I had the technical bulletins. Familia, send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and I'll send you the information I have on this. But there's actually a way to find out what temperature the DTC valve, which is a temperature responsive expansion valve essentially, and it has a capillary tube that's shoved in the top of the compressor, and whenever the temperature of the compressor gets hot enough, it meters refrigerant into the compressor to cool off the internals of the compressor, okay? And it's when you see high compression ratios, they start to have cooling issues. So the DTC valve works when the head of the compressor gets to a certain temperature, it opens the valve. Now there's also a strainer on that valve, and that strainer can get plugged up. In a perfect world, we would install a ball valve before that, so that way you can pump the system down, pull it off, and check the strainer, but most of the time they're not there. But you just need to look at the cut-in temperature, and as far as telling whether or not it's actually working, when it is feeding refrigerant, you'll actually see it condensate and or frost up on the outlet of the valve going into the compressor. So yeah, that's the easiest way. Other than that, it's not super easy to diagnose those, but I honestly have not really had any failures on the DTC valves. But I will say that when I do a compressor replacement, the DTC valve does get replaced with the compressor. So hopefully that answers your question, Familia. Appion or True Blue vacuum hoses? Caesar, I have them both, and I have to say that the True Blue, in my opinion, are easier to work with. The Appions still work. They're just really large and big, and they get in the way, and they're hard to bend. The True Blue hoses are much more flexible than the Appions. Keep in mind, though, too, the True Blue hoses, they are rather large, too. You can get special fittings that make them fit into tighter places and stuff. But there is, if you're working on reach-in coolers, it's going to be kind of hard to get the True Blue hoses into tiny little spots. But if you're working on air conditioners, refrigeration systems, walk-in coolers and stuff like that, hands down, get the True Blue hoses. You will love them. Keep in mind, too, if you guys want to help to support the channel and you're interested in purchasing some tools, if you go to truetechtools.com, I have an offer code BIGPICTURE. One word. If you use that code, I get a small commission. You get to save 8% on your order as of today. That 8% may change in the future, but right now it's still 8%. So you get an 8% discount on the price. I get a small commission from that. If you know what you want to purchase, shoot me an email. I can generate an affiliate link, and I get a little bit more of a commission, and you still get the same discount. So, all right, let's see what else we got in here. How did I get my customers to start my own business? Joshua. So when my dad started the business in the late 80s, early 90s, I think I said 90, 91, something like that. We have had some of the same customers since then. Now, what has happened was one of our big customers at the time, we did a lot of work for him. It kept growing. It kept growing. It got too big. We consolidated and cut back on them, but still have done their work. Managers or people that used to be cooks got promoted to managers, got promoted to higher up corporate level positions, and they remembered us and they brought us with them. Then when people in that restaurant changed companies and went to work for another restaurant, they brought us with them. So remember, that guy that's washing the dishes, he's not a peon. He's another human being, and treat him with respect, and maybe he'll remember you when he moves on. Okay? That guy that was washing dishes might become a manager someday. He might become a corporate executive one day. I've seen it happen. Okay? So remember that. When you're frustrated and you're angry and the cook's in your way, don't be a jerk. Okay? Be polite. You know, it's okay to say you're frustrated, but be polite. And remember, that guy may be going somewhere someday, and hopefully he's going to remember you when he goes there. Okay? So let's see what else we got in here. Yes, big picture. Yeah, correct. It is big picture. Correct, by itself. Rich is telling George Robles to learn crane hand signals, never use a cell phone to talk to the crane operator. Cell phones do have a delay. And that is a very good point, okay? Rich is right. Sometimes cell phones have delays, sometimes things like that. I've had crane operators want to give me walkie-talkies, and walkie-talkie even still too. I realize that there's some times that you have to do that kind of stuff, okay? But I agree with Rich in that hand signals are the biggest, best way and proper way to signal a crane. Of course, you want to make sure the crane operator can see you. He has good line of sight. You know, you want to make sure you're on the same page too. I've worked with new crane operators where I have to before, you know, technically we should all be doing this. Have a site walk, have them come onto the roof, show them what we're doing, and then go over the hand signals with them. These are the common hand signals that I use. Because sometimes, you know, I've seen people on the roof going, going like that and, doing all these weird things. And it's like, man, that's got to be so hard for crane operators. Now, I do give crane operators credit because they have to work with that crap all day long and people doing the hand signals. But try to find out the proper hand signals, okay? And using those really does help. Now, on the flip side, I will say when you use the proper hand signals and the crane operator doesn't know what you're telling them to do, that's when you need to start getting scared. And I've done that before too. So, but yeah, there's no replacement for proper hand signals, proper eye-to-eye contact with the crane guy, and going from there. Okay. And obviously everybody working in sync together. When you're doing a crane op, everybody needs to think and work together as one unit. Everybody needs to understand, stay from under the load, okay, as much as possible. Keep your hands out. When we're setting a unit, it's coming down. Do not ever put your hands under the unit when it's being close to being set. Do not put yourself in compromising positions. I mean, these are all basic common sense things, but I mean, you do have to say this because some people just don't think that they've got a 2,000-pound unit being set down, and their finger is not going to stop that unit from setting down, especially on a sharp curve adapter. Their finger is going to go bye-bye. It's going to get cut off. So it's really important, but hand signals are the best way. Now, again, there's weird circumstances where you have to do other things, but for the most part, you want to use hand signals. All right. And think about a phone too. Again, I'm not criticizing. I mean, sometimes you have to do, but think about a phone. What happens if you need the boom to move that way? Okay. How do you tell that to the crane operator? What direction is he facing? Is he necessarily facing you, or is he facing the other way? I mean, so do you tell him move the boom left? Well, is that his left or your left? Like, that's where it gets confusing. So when you're using proper hand signals and you're just directing the crane, move that way, whatever you're going to do, he sees it and he knows which way to move. Okay. So keep that in mind. All right. Donald wants wants tips because he's a residential guy and he's going into the commercial side, and he wants to know if I have any advice for him. Okay, so going from residential to commercial. Well, first and foremost, the only difference between residential and commercial, okay, it's still a compressor. It still moves refrigerant. All right, you still have a condenser, you still have an evaporator, you still have a metering device, you still have fan motors, you still have contactors, you still have low voltage, okay? But maybe the low voltage isn't 24 volts. Maybe it's 120 volts. Maybe the primary voltage coming into the system isn't 208 volts single phase, it's 208 three phase, or it's 483 phase or bigger, okay? So the voltages change. Some of the control strategies change, but it's still the same concepts. So if you thoroughly understand residential air conditioning, it's not going to be that big of a deal. It's just the size of the equipment is going to change. The biggest advice I can give to anybody is don't just say you understand residential. Prove it. Show it, okay? You need to understand the electrical system. You need to understand the electrical circuits. You need to understand how motors work, right? The refrigerant cycle. You need to understand what happens if the refrigerant's not being subcooled enough. What happens if you're overcharged on your system, okay? It's the same stuff moving to the commercial side, just bigger, okay? That's really the biggest thing. And then you're going to obviously need to, depending on how high you're going and how big you're going, you might need to get into more industrial stuff. Refrigerants are going to change and stuff like that. But all right, let's get into the chat and see what I'm missing here. Have I ever seen a short that almost started a fire? Not that I can think of. Oh, right on, Michael Hansberry. It's awesome that you're here, bud. Have I ever had a unit fall onto the roof that was hooked onto a crane? Joshua, cross my fingers and bite your tongue. Don't ever ask me that question again. No, I have not. I'm just kidding with you, bud. But no, thankfully, no, okay? I do not ever want that to happen, but you treat every crane lift like the entire crane's going to fall on the building, okay? If it can, it will, so you always treat it that way. And best case scenario, you're going to come out happy and the bad thing didn't happen, okay? But site walks are the most important thing, okay? When you're setting up a crane. Now, the crane operator should do this too, but I still go down and verify. Where's he setting up at? Is there any underground vaults anywhere near where he's setting up? See, when you're dealing with restaurants, oftentimes they will have grease traps and cleanouts and sewer manholes and different things on their back docks. And if the crane's just setting up there, you got to watch out and make sure that he's not setting that outrigger up. He doesn't want to put the load of that crane, on 12 inches of ground that has a 6-foot vault underneath it. Okay, so always looking at everything and always assume the worst is going to happen. I would highly suggest that you guys don't, try to strap your loads. I'm not a certified crane person. I've just used some common sense, but you want to make sure that you properly strap your loads, okay? You don't necessarily want to just move straps underneath the load and cinch them down. I mean, sometimes you have to do that, but in a perfect world, you have a shackle on every corner. It's properly hooked and secured. Not necessarily, just putting hooks into the corner of the AC. That's not the greatest way to do it. You really should have shackles on every corner and have them loaded properly. Pay attention to the load rating of the shackles, the load rating of the straps. There's so much that goes into these things. So just be very careful working around cranes, okay? John asks about, this is a really cool question, actually. John, I take it is a homeowner, is my possibility by the question, but I don't know, but it's a really good question. So he's very curious about adding a pool heater subcooler to his system, or a heat harvester. Okay, these are very popular in the 90s and they still are popular today. So essentially what it does is you pipe it into the refrigeration system. It takes the discharge gas before it subcools that gas, okay? So the discharge coming out of the compressor, and it runs it through a subcooler, which essentially is a pipe that goes into usually a coaxial heat exchanger, okay, or a flat plate heat exchanger. And on the other side of that is the pool water. And what you're doing is you're using it as supplemental heat. So you're grabbing the heat before it goes to your condenser, because most of the time that's wasted heat going out the top of the condenser, okay? Most of the time that's wasted heat. And this is where you need to be careful, John. The expansion valve, or the metering device on that system, is meant to operate within a certain envelope. So while, yes, one of these Add-on subcoolers can increase the efficiency of your system. It can also hurt your system if it's being used in a time where it's really cold outside or it's moderately cool outside, right, or moderately warm, because you do not want to drop the liquid temperature, right, or the liquid line temperature of that refrigerant. I guess it would be liquid temperature. You do not want to drop the liquid temperature too much, okay? Because if you drop it too much, you could be exiting the operating envelope of the expansion valve, and you could be hurting your system too. So yes, I'm sure they do increase efficiency. In my experience, again, coming from the mid-90s, where a lot of these, we called them heat harvesters or subcoolers, they really were nuisance, and most of the time the customer didn't want to repair them when they had leaks and failed, and so we ended up just bypassing them all, okay? Remember, too, that adding one of these devices typically will void your warranty, because you more than likely are going to have to tap into the system, remove the refrigerant, add a copper line that diverts the refrigerant, and the manufacturer, the OEM manufacturer of the equipment, typically doesn't want you to do this. If they're not truly cutting into the system and taking the refrigerant and diverting it, they're not truly going to get the most efficiency out of that system. So it's a fine line of being a good thing and a bad thing, okay? So be very cautious about that. And also, a lot of those manufacturers, they make these devices and then they go out of business, and then us as service technicians have to come in after the fact and try to figure out what the heck is this thing, you know, and it can get kind of confusing. So let's see what else we got in here. How does a CPR valve work? As far as the description of how it works is a little difficult for me to explain on a live stream, but I can tell you that it is a pressure regulating device that essentially holds back the refrigerant to a certain extent to try to reduce the suction gas coming back to the compressor, so the compressor does not get overloaded on a hot pull down startup, okay? Like right out of defrost, when the system is really, really warm, all of a sudden you'll flood all this refrigerant back to the compressor, and the compressor can go off on thermal overload. So a CPR valve is there to hold back the pressure, right, and let it through slowly at a certain rate. So on a CPR valve, you actually set it on the hottest temperature that the system will ever be, and you open the valve all the way, you let it run, and then you start closing the valve until the run load amps of the compressor meet what the manufacturer says the run load amp should be. And theoretically, you're holding back the refrigerant on the system and slowly letting it through. Hopefully that answers your question for you, bud. In my videos, I've shown it a few times where I'll be working on a Hvacr refrigeration unit, a self-contained refrigeration unit, and I've described it as having glycol in there and being a mini chiller. So this person had asked me, forgive me, I don't have your name written down, but this person had asked me, he understands refrigeration systems, but why the heck would they have glycol in that system? What's the purpose of the glycol? It's a secondary medium for heat transfer, essentially, okay? So what they do is they have a condensing unit with an evaporator bolted onto the condensing unit, okay? It has a flat plate heat exchanger. On one side of that heat exchanger is refrigerant. On the other side, they're circulating glycol with a pump. The glycol is circulated through the base section of the refrigerator and the top section of the refrigerator 24 hours a day, just constantly running. It never stops running. And the refrigeration system is cycled on and off to maintain certain glycol temperatures. So what's the purpose? Why use glycol, and why not just pump regular refrigerant into the system? Now, why the manufacturer exactly did that, I don't know. But as an observation, as a service technician, I can tell you what I notice. And what I notice is we don't have very many refrigerant leaks on the system, okay? Very, very few refrigerant leaks compared to when we pumped refrigerant through the system. The evaporators would always leak. We'd be fixing them. On the glycol pumping units, they're called Hvacr Blue units. I hardly ever notice any leaks, okay? I have noticed them like at the suction service valve for the compressor, but that's not in the system. The second thing I notice is the unit takes forever to come down to temperature, but once it gets down to temperature and you open a door to grab food or something, the box temperature doesn't change. It takes forever to come up in temperature too, okay? And I noticed that there's long cycle times. The condenser will turn on for a minute and then it'll turn off for 4 minutes, you know? So we're not noticing short cycling, turning on and off. So I would imagine the reason why the manufacturer changed this system over to glycol being pumped through there is for efficiency. And while they take a long time to come down to temperature, they take a long time to come up from temperature. So I think it's just all about efficiency, really. Let me see what I'm missing in the chat. Do I use RX11 flush on grounded compressors? No, I do not, Vlad. Early in my career, I used it all the time. And to be fair, I cannot tell you of any systems that I had a problem with the RX11 flush that I ever had a problem with after the fact. But I was taught to dump that in every one of my systems every time there was a burnout. And I did that all the time. You'd use RX11 flush, and then you'd use acid scavenger, which was just like this oily-like substance you'd pour into the compressor, then you braze it in, and supposedly it was supposed to make the acid go away and whatever, all this different stuff. I stopped using that many years ago, and I noticed that on my compressor burnouts, when I have a burnout now, I don't add RX11 flush. I just simply purge the system with nitrogen. I don't add acid scavenger or insert name of whatever kind of acid neutralizer or whatever they're called. I don't add any of those into the system, and I just keep the system refrigeration oil and or nitrogen that purge through the system, and I pull a proper evacuation. Put on a suction line filter dryer, high HH core, which is the high wax removal, and put on a liquid line dryer with the HH core, and just come back and change dryers if you need to. I take the manufacturer's stance of the only thing that belongs in a system is refrigeration oil and refrigerant. Adding these additives and these different things, I'm not judging anybody for doing so, because like I said, the first part of my career, I used them and I honestly never had a problem, but I've just since got away from that and prefer not to add anything else to the system, and things have been going pretty darn good. So, all right. Why don't I have motors rebuilt constantly? When I change these motors on air conditioners, these big 5 horsepower blowers that have bad bearings or something, why not just take them in to get rebuilt? Okay, why do I always put a new motor in there and waste a perfectly good old motor that could have just used bearings? And it's simply because the customer doesn't want to pay for me to come out, diagnose it, take the motor out, their system is down the entire time, go have the motor rebuilt, bring the motor back, start it up, find out that there's something else wrong with the motor, and still end up having to replace the motor, okay? So in my eyes, I just go in with an OEM replacement motor and call it a day and be done the first time, okay? My customers don't want to pay for that kind of stuff, and I don't have the time to be playing those games. Again, it's all about simplicity for my employees too. Having my guys go out and change bearings on a motor, make sure they get the right bearing. Does it fit right? Something's not right. Like, it's just put in the OEM motor and call it a day. Okay, there's too much. I have to uncomplicate my business and make it as easy as possible for my employees. With the same effect, I'm going to talk about something else. In a recent video, I was working with the one with the pigeons. I was working on a walk-in freezer, and in that video, it had a smart controller. And I see mixed results, guys. If I ever diagnose a system with a standard defrost clock, I get majority of the people from outside of the United States and a bunch of people from inside the United States saying, why didn't you put a smart evaporator controller in there? Get rid of those stupid mechanical time clocks and just put in a digital controller that does everything for you, okay? I see both sides of it, and I honestly prefer old school with a mechanical time clock and or a Graslin time clock. I prefer not to use the temperature controllers that have built-in defrost. Now, I do use them, okay? But when I have problematic systems, an old school conventional defrost clock is so much easier to diagnose. Let's think about this. If you have a controller that the programming's messed up on it and it's not doing one of the 4 defrosts it's supposed to do a day, how do you know that, right? If it's an electronic controller, it's encapsulated in a box. You can't see anything. You assume that it does its defrost, right? So when you're coming out trying to diagnose an icing up issue and you can't see the mechanics of that controller saying it's supposed to go into defrost right now and it's not, it makes it hard to diagnose. If you have a mechanical time clock that has a timer motor on it that spins, you can mark that and you can come back in 4 hours and see if it's progressed 4 hours past 2 defrosts. And if it didn't, you can diagnose it as a bad time clock. You can physically see that it's broken. I understand there's some benefits to using the electronic stuff, and I agree some of that stuff is nice, but I will say that when you're having a problematic freezer that keeps icing up and it is driving you up the wall, there is nothing worse than having a smart controller on there because you just don't know. And oftentimes you end up changing that controller just because maybe it's the problem and I'm so sick of coming back here and maybe they didn't need that controller. Okay, so I prefer the old school method, but call me stubborn, whatever. I'm not saying I don't use them. I still install equipment with the new, smart temperature controllers that have built-in defrost and all that stuff. Recently, I just worked on that video where I had the walk-in freezer and I had to come back with my computer and log into the system and add an extra sensor and all this stuff. Here's the problem I have. My technicians don't carry computers on them. They don't know how to log into those systems. And it frustrates me that I have one system out there that I have to have a computer to log in. And I will say, I love the Key to Therm products. Okay, that is a Key to Therm evap efficiency controller. It's really neat and it has a lot of technology. But their display on that thing, if you don't have the computer, is a nightmare. As fast as that thing scrolls when you're trying to, because you can do everything from the display, but it is ridiculous how stupid it is to try to go through everything. So, guys, you know, I'm not perfect, but there's some things I'm stubborn about, and it's all about making my job easier and my technician's job easier. So that's the easiest thing, and getting the equipment fixed right, you know, obviously. All right. Can I explain how Cobra head taps work versus regular taps? That's an interesting one, Scott. So Cobra head taps are a beer tap system, okay? And what it does is it actually takes the glycol and circulates it through the beer tap, but it maintains, that glycol needs to be kept at a much lower temperature. Cobra tap is referring to the shape of the tap head where they pour the beer from. And the tap head is shaped like a cobra snake. If you've ever seen one, they're actually really cool. And when they're working correctly, they look like a cobra head, and it's amazing. If you get a clear ice formation on them, man, those things are awesome. But the cobra head taps, okay, again, it takes the glycol that's cooled by a refrigeration system, brings it way below freezing, runs it through the tap head, and the tap head is supposed to form ice on it, and it's supposed to look like a cobra head. But the humidity in the building needs to be absolutely perfect. The air conditioning needs to be absolutely perfect. Your building needs to be maintained at like 72 to 74 degrees, no higher. Humidity needs to be below 50%. And the glycol concentration has to be perfect. If it's too thick or too thin, you run into problems. And then on top of that, you also run into problems while maintaining the Cobra head tap. You don't want to freeze the beer too, because if the glycol lines get too cold, it starts to create a problem. But the whole purpose of the Cobra head tap is literally a cosmetic thing, and it just looks really cool if you see a properly operating Cobra head tap. Holy moly. Peter Smart, thank you so very much for that super chat, man. That is amazing. You guys, it's so humbling to get the support from you guys. Wow. Thank you, bud. That's really cool. All right. Let's see what else we got in here. Have I ever worked on ammonia systems? No, I have not. You're in Western Kentucky. Labor rates there are 80 to 90 per hour. What are they in my area, Southern California? The labor rates are... for commercial, 90 to 140, 150 per hour, just depending on what part of the state you live in and where you're working. If it's a high, like San Francisco, the labor rates are through the roof, okay? Because the prices of everything are just nuts. It costs you an insane amount of money just to get over the bridges, either the Bay Bridge or the Golden Gate Bridge, just to get into or onto the island. It's just ridiculous. So everywhere's a little bit different. In my area, it's in the 90 to 120 is the most common range. And I'm right towards the bottom of that. I actually need to move up more towards the middle. So let's see what else we got in here. How do I know what scroll compressor to replace a reciprocating compressor with, Vlad? That is a tricky question. Okay, I have never talked to Copeland about this, but I have some opinions about this. I've had some old package units that I tried to change over to a scroll compressor that had a recip before, and I ran into some problems. So you need to make sure that it is capable of a scroll compressor. You need to make sure there's no restrictions in the system, and I would lean on the manufacturer of the equipment before you try to change over to a scroll. Another thing about a scroll compressor too is that you know, depending on what type of a compressor you had in there before, you might, or I mean, assuming it's a recip before, your vibration bends and different things like that. So a lot of times on refrigeration systems, they'll have like vibration loops built into it before it goes into the discharge. And when you're having to repipe compressors, a lot of times you have to take out those vibration loops. So you got to be very careful about that kind of stuff. Okay. So I would lean on the manufacturer of the equipment and talk to them before you start just throwing in scroll compressors on recip systems. Peter, dude, Peter, Joshua, you guys are amazing. Thank you so very much. You guys are making my day. Scott, thank you so much. Hopefully that answers your question for you, Scott. Oh man, you guys are amazing. I'm dumbfounded by these super chats. Thank you so very much, guys. I don't even know what to say. All right, let me see. This is a good distracted, but I'm distracted. All right. Could I elaborate more on the KE2's defrost issue starting in the side panel of the evaporators? Bishop of Hexen 192. Okay, so I do not have any specific answers to that. In my recent video, I have a evap efficiency controller, and I tend to notice that on that controller, I start to see ice building up in one side of the evaporator on the walk-in freezers. I think that I might have solved that problem by adding a second sensor and moving it more towards the left, but I tend to notice that on those, they start to freeze up on one side and they just build, and it's harder and harder. So I really don't have the answer to that. Over time, you guys will see when I release another video on this, and we'll see if we are solving that problem by adding the second sensor into there. Vlad, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate. You guys, thank you. I don't even know what to say. Thank you very much. Peter Smart, dude, holy moly. Yeah, thank you. All right. I'm all distracted, but it's all good. Thank you guys. You guys are freaking awesome. You guys are amazing. Okay. A question I get a lot. This is a really easy one. You guys, I show my smartwatch in my videos all the time, and people are asking me what smartwatch I use. Okay. I use, it is a Galaxy. Well, before this was a Galaxy Samsung Galaxy Active 2 watch. Okay. And I finally wore this watch out. It doesn't work right. It still says the time, but it doesn't work right. And I carry it in a watch band. Okay. This is a Subcase watch band. It's made by Subcase. So it makes it look like a giant G-Shock watch. Now, this watch was the one that I had, but I've since replaced it. I just recently got a new watch, and I got the Galaxy, Watch 3 is what they call it. Okay. And I have it in the same case. This is the new one. This is the old one. They almost look identical, but it is a smartwatch that works with my Samsung phone. My favorite thing about this watch, guys, number one, is this case. This case makes it look like a giant G-Shock watch. It's really cool. But I love the fact that with the smartwatch, when I get text messages or emails, it comes across my watch, and I don't necessarily have to pull my phone out of my pocket to look at it. If I get a text message, I can just look at my watch and be like, oh yeah, I don't need to worry about that right now. So I really do like having the smartwatch. It's really beneficial for emails and everything. You guys, these super chats, holy moly, you guys are amazing. Infinite possibilities. Thank you so very much. You guys are like humbling me here. It's amazing. All right. Let's see. Could I do a motor dissection video like I do with compressors? It's a possibility. I'd need some help on that one from someone that knows a little bit more about motors for sure. All right. So let's see what else we got in here. Could I do? I already answered that question. Okay. Why do I not use an app in my phone to take notes down? I get this question quite often. I actually do, guys. So what happens is I truly do pick up my phone and start filming before I go through these calls. So oftentimes I will say things like, I wonder if I think we just worked on this or something like that. And it's because I genuinely have not gone through my service history. So I have apps in my phone. I use a invoicing software called Intuit Field Service Management. I've used it for over 10 years, I think, and it tracks all my invoices. So I can look up history at the restaurant for the past 5 years or something like that. I can look up everything we've done. I can pull up invoices. I can see what technician was on site, how much they billed, and all that stuff. So I can see all that. And the same thing, I also do have a note-taking app. I used to carry a pocketbook that I would write notes in every single day. Bishop of Hexen 192, thanks so much for that super chat. You guys are blowing my mind with all these super chats. You're amazing. Thank you. So I used to carry a pocketbook that I would keep notes in, and I don't anymore. I just have an app in my phone that has all my notes built into it, and we just go through it. So I do that. But what you guys hear is that since I'm literally walking up to the unit, I haven't gone through and looked at the service history and looked. So oftentimes I'll say, I think we just worked on this, or, I wonder when we change this, because I haven't looked yet. And I usually do look. So I do use those apps to track everything. But I do appreciate the advice and the feedback from everybody, guys. Sometimes you guys give me advice, hey, you should check out this app or different things. And I do look into them. So thank you so very much. What else do we got in here? Oh yeah, the Lego crane. I do want to address that. So my daughter built that for me. We were at the Lego store about a week ago when my wife was out of town. I was trying to spoil my kids and buy their love, right? Because my wife was out of town. So I took my daughter to the Lego store and I let her pick out a couple different Legos for herself. And I picked that crane out for myself and asked her to build it for me. So she did. So I have a TXV hanging from it. And, I'll be honest with you though, that TXV is really pushing the load of that crane because if I touch it, the crane will tip over. It does have outriggers on it, but it's pretty neat. It's got little dials. You can move the boom up, down, left, right, in, out, hoist up, hoist down. You could do everything with it. It's really cool. So I like those things in the background. It's a cool conversation piece. What's my opinion on new Calgon's iWave? Do I think it works as advertised? Infinite possibilities. I'm going to be completely honest with you right now. I don't understand any of those air cleaners. They're all voodoo magic to me because I do not understand the science, nor can I see the science. In all fairness, though, okay, I've installed over 20 iWaves because my customer demanded them, okay? Do I think that they're changing any air quality? I don't know, okay? And out of curiosity, I installed one at my house. I have an iWave in my house because I had one left over from that job and I was just curious, so I threw it in there. One thing I will say is in the iWave instructions, it says that it does not create ozone, okay? But I'm confused because I had an iWave sitting in my office for about 3 weeks and I would shut my door every day. And every time I come in my office, it smells like bleach. And my understanding is that the ozone smells like bleach. So I think they do create ozone, okay? I do have one installed in my air handler at my house or my furnace, but I don't notice a difference. So I don't see dirt collecting like people say you will. I don't see my filter getting dirtier than usual. So I don't know if they work or not. I'm kind of dumbfounded. I'm more of a fan of proper clean air, fresh air, change the filters, clean the evaporator. That's what I tried to talk my customer. I literally tried to talk my customer out of spending thousands and thousands of dollars on those iWaves. I was like, look, dude, these things sound like crazy to me. I don't understand them. Let me just come in and clean your units. And he was like, no, I want those iWaves. I was like, all right, whatever. I put them in, and he put a certificate on his wall that say they have iWaves installed in every restaurant. And all right, whatever. Here's your thing. I'm just don't understand them. Potential HVAC. Thank you so much for that super chat, man. You guys are blowing my mind. You guys are amazing. Let's see what else we got in here. What is my... Oh, I already answered that question. Okay. Where's my 100K LED sign? My buddy Rich, GT350R, made that for me in conjunction with my buddy Ike, who tried to help him, kind of gave him direction and stuff. I still have it. It's sitting back here. I'm trying to figure out a way because that 100K sign... The way that my ring light, it reflects off of the sign and it just doesn't look good to me. So I got to figure out a way to change my lighting or something to where I can still have up my sign because I love it. And like I said, it's sitting right back here behind my desk. I just haven't figured out a way to do it without the glare. And another thing, Rich had told me, and I really want to do this too, I want to put like different colored plastic or glass. So that way the letters light up different colors. You can have one LED light behind it and then have it pushed up against the wall, but because the different colors, you can see things. So I'm going to do that too. But we will put the light up soon. I still have it. In my recent video where I had to relocate the pigeons, right? I hate pigeons, by the way, the flying rats. But I knew I would get a little bit of pushback, but whatever, it is what it is. But people saying that I wasn't compassionate enough or whatever made the... Peter, you're blowing my mind with all these super chats, dude. Yeah, I'm dumbfounded, man. Thank you so very much, dude. I don't know if you mean to keep putting these in. Oh, no, the potential just disappeared. I thought well, anyway, still, thank you, Peter. I thought another one popped up, but it was another one disappeared the way that it shows up on my screen. But anyways, I lost my train of thought here again. Oh, birds. Guys, I couldn't have been nicer to those damn birds. I tried to take the doors off and tell them to leave. They didn't leave. That was it. Okay. I shooed one of the birds out. It flew away. The other one, I had to take a stick and kind of politely nudge him out. And I nudged him into the shade on the other side of the building. But those birds can't be in there. I got no compassion for them crapping all over the place in there. That was nasty. That was unhealthy. That's dangerous. I can't have my techs breathing in all that crap. And I gave the customer every chance. I kept telling them. My guys kept going out there saying they're not fixing it. They're not fixing it. I told them 3-4 times, get these birds taken care of. They never did. So I finally did it. And I can tell you what, that cost them a hell of a lot more money with me doing it. than calling a pest control. But it will never happen again on that rack because of the way that I did it. So problem solved. I already covered that one. I'm crossing things off my list right now. Let me go through here. I already covered that one. Why don't I use an R22 replacement? Why am I still using R22? That's a question I get quite often. Okay, here's the thing. The best refrigerant to use in these air conditioners that originally came with R22 is R22, okay? You put it in an alternative, there's going to be some sort of an efficiency drop, okay? There's going to be some things you have to do. There's going to be requirements you have to do, system modifications you have to make, and different stuff like that. The easiest gas to keep in there is R22. So, bottom line, I go to my customers and I say, hey, there's a bunch of different replacements for R22. Do you want me to try using these? And then I give them the things we have to do to properly make them work. We need to change the oil in the compressor. We need to do this. We need to do that. And before you guys jump on me and say that you don't have to change the oil, if you read the installation instructions on any one of those alternative refrigerants, or at least all the ones that I've looked at in the past couple years, in the fine print, they all say they work best with polyester oil, but you can use mineral oil so long as you meet this certain criteria, which basically is a cover their ass kind of a statement. It works best with polyester oil. Peter, you're amazing, dude. Thank you. Okay. I saw another one come through too. Twisted Candle Company, you're amazing. I really appreciate it. You guys are blowing my mind. Peter, dude, you're blowing my mind, man. Thank you. Really appreciate this. This is awesome, guys. You guys are amazing. So hopefully that answered that question. I just prefer to use R22. My customers aren't arguing against it. They know the prices are going up, but you know, I just keep going in with that. Again, making it as easy as possible for my employees and the next guy to work on the system. I just keep it R22. Why did I dump oil on the roof? I got a bunch of comments, I'm assuming from roofers, saying that I was probably ruining the roof by dumping oil on there. First off, I kind of had a hunch there might have been a little oil in that evaporator when I changed it, but I didn't know there was going to be that much. But still, I cleaned it up, guys. I washed that roof. We cleaned the condenser on it. We did all that stuff. So trust me, I cleaned it up. I dried it up. I don't go around just pouring oil on the roof. I realize that's not good for them, okay? Question, probably one of the number one questions I get, why the heck do we plumb the condensate drain to the sewer? Why don't we just drain it on the roof like every other state besides California? Why do we use copper pipes? Why not use PVC? I've answered this ad nauseum, but I'll answer it again. I don't like PVC because in the UV exposure we get, the sunlight that we get, it becomes dry, brittle, and it cracks. When I send a guy up on the roof to take a hose up there and wash all the condensers, and he drags the hose across the drain line, it breaks the drain line. It's just easier to go copper. It lasts forever unless some jerk goes and steals it, okay? So why put copper back up on the roof that someone stole it from? Because the customer has a job to keep those people off their roof. I bring it up to them. They don't like us using PVC either because they're constantly getting service calls on it. If you break PVC and it breaks below the roof deck, you're now getting a plumber involved, okay? I just prefer copper. Next bet, why do we plumb them to the drain or to the sewer, and why not just drain it on the roof and let it just go? Because in California, all of our water goes to the ocean. The storm drains don't necessarily get cleaned, okay? The water, it gets literally dumped into the ocean, okay? So we plumb our stuff into the sewer so that way it can be properly treated before it's dumped into the ocean. Our sewer water gets treated in reclamation plants, and then it gets dumped back into the ocean once it's high quality. There's actually even some places that the sewage water is dumped or is cleaned so much that they actually pipe it into drinking water, which is really interesting. There's a couple different counties that do that. They actually clean it better than regular water, supposedly, or whatever. Some people are just drinking crap water, basically. Let me get to the questions in the chat right now. The egg rolled under the unit. What did I do with it? I hosed it right off and let it roll down into the drain, and then hosed it right into the drain and just left it sitting in the drain. It never cracked, by the way. Just never cracked. All right, what was the most oil-logged coil I've seen more logged than the walk-in freezer? No, that walk-in freezer is the only one, and that walk-in freezer is still running, by the way. It's still running. I haven't been back there since I made that video like 2 years ago. Can I recommend a crane safety training class in my local area? George Robles. No, but I would love to take one. I've never taken a crane safety class. So I would genuinely love to take a crane safety class in my area. If anybody out there knows, please send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. I've thought about this in the past. I've tried to arrange a local crane operator that does safety trainings. It's just never something I really pursued very hard. But I did find a guy that was willing to come out and certify us, because technically you're supposed to be certified too. So, what else am I getting? I killed a baby pigeon. I did, probably. So, what kind of factors go into replacing a unit that not just repairing it? Basic question. Ryzium 420, thanks so much for that super chat, man. Will I be attending the AHR Expo in January? Yes, the plans are that I'm going to be there, Mitchell. We will have meetups and different things scheduled. I will definitely be spending some good time at the Sporlin booth at the AHR show. So long as everything goes on, I will be there, okay? I'm about 4 hours away from Vegas, so worst case scenario, even if I can't take off 4 days, which is what I want to take off, or 5 days or whatever, I'll just drive out for the day if I have to. So I will be at AHR 2021. Let's see. What did I miss? There was a question I was going to answer. What the heck was it? And I already lost my train of thought. Where's it at? I'm trying to... Oh, what kind of factors go into replacing a unit, not just repairing it? Okay, when it goes into replacing an air conditioner, number one, you need to think about logistics. Can this happen during the day? Does this have to happen at nighttime? Does it have to happen on a Saturday or a Sunday? Different areas actually require that, okay? If that's the case, you need to quote appropriately for overtime rates. The crane's going to charge you extra, different things like that. Can you pick it with a normal crane? Do you have to use a helicopter? I've never used a helicopter. I've only used normal cranes, but everything goes into that. Don't assume prices from anybody. You always call and get quotes, and you have the crane operator either come and do a site walk with you, or you have them pull it up on Google Images. You discuss certain limitations. During COVID, everybody had big giant canopies and tents set up around their building, so that limited the places that you can set up cranes. So you'd have to get bigger and bigger cranes to pick from a certain position. Typically, you don't want to have people in the building when you're lifting equipment off of a roof. So I prefer to have nobody in the building. You will make sure you let the management know. They do not want staff in the building. You know, sometimes a manager, maybe one, but you keep them in an area where it's safe in case the worst was to happen and the crane was to come down. The next thing you need to think about, electrical limitations, plumbing limitations, city codes. You have to get the city involved. They'll have requirements for you. Where can the crane park? There's all kinds of stuff. Does the crane have the proper insurance? Do you have the proper insurance? Does the building have the proper insurance? Do you have keys to the building? I mean, there's so much that goes into it. So, why do we use a P-trap on an AC drain? Okay, the person was saying that he thought P-traps were meant to keep sewer gases. And while a P-trap does keep sewer gases, okay, out of, unwanted places, the main purpose of a P-trap on the air conditioners that you see in my video is because the drains are typically on the return air side of the system. So they're in the negative airflow. And what can happen, because they're in the negative airflow, if you do not have something preventing the air will come through the drain line and it will prevent water from draining out. This will actually happen. If you do not have a P-trap on a system that's supposed to have it, the drain pan can be completely full of water, but it pulls air through the line so it doesn't let the water drain out the drain, and it'll overflow down into the ductwork, okay? So while a P-trap does serve a purpose, there typically should be P-traps down in the building. We shouldn't have to worry about sewer gases up at the air conditioner, okay? But if for some reason they didn't have that figured out or whatever, I guess the P-trap would be preventing sewer gases from going into there too. Keep in mind too, I've done this by accident, putting a P-trap on a system that doesn't need a P-trap. So that can cause some issues. For the most part, it'll typically be okay, but it can cause issues because if you have a double trap, maybe it's not going to drain fast enough and different stuff like that. So Rude package units, that was the one that I made a mistake on, and I put a P-trap on it when it didn't need one because it had an internal trap already. So keep that in mind. Let me see what I got going on down in the chat. Holy moly, I saw another super chat. I already answered that one. Rizium 420 again. Thanks so much for that super chat, bud. You use what you're told to use, not your choice. Good point, man. Do what you're told. What do you do when you find black mold inside an air exchanger? Replace the unit and ducts. You bring it up to the customer's attention and see what they want to do and document everything, okay? Document. You bring it up to the customer. You say this unit has mold in the ductwork. What do you want to do? And then you would probably need to call in a mold remediation company to make sure that they get everything out of there properly. I'm not certified to do that kind of stuff. So, you know, again, just put it on the customers and let them deal with it. Have you ever had a refrigeration system catch fire? No. I've come in after the fact and seen like burn marks on a compressor because they had a terminal vent that ignited the oil and stuff like that, but it never like caught a building on fire or anything like that. Let's see what else we got in here. Reason why you don't assume first, 3 letters is what people will think of you. Yep, you'll make an ass out of yourself for sure if you assume. How do nugget ice makers work compared to a regular Hoshizaki ice machine, for example? ISX Blaster. Okay, so it's actually a rather ingenious design. On a nugget ice maker or a flaker, they have a barrel as an evaporator, okay? It has a barrel, and in the center of that barrel is an auger that spins. That auger looks like a corkscrew. And what that auger does is as ice starts to form, because that barrel is a giant evaporator, ice forms around the circle of the barrel. That auger spins and cuts the ice off of the evaporator as it's forming. So the cool thing about a nugget ice machine or a flaker ice machine is it doesn't have a harvest cycle per se, because it's making ice and harvesting ice at the same time, because that auger is spinning, grabbing the ice, and because of the shape of the auger, it pushes the ice up, and then they'll typically have some sort of a head. Hoshizaki calls it an extruding head. Hoshizaki has 2 different types you can use. You can use a flaker head, or you can use a cubelet head that makes more like a nugget looking machine. Fullet has a nugget head too, and it basically compresses the ice that's being shaved off into the shape that they want it to be. And then it dries the ice, of all things, right? It pushes the ice through, and it usually has a drain that allows any excess water that's been built up to drain out. And then it pushes the ice down into the barrel, and they are down into the bin. So it's a corkscrew type device that runs, and it spins off the little shaved, it's like shaved ice. It shaves it off, pushes it up through a head, compresses it down into a whatever shape they want, whether it's a flake for like fish presentation, whether it's a nugget like the Fullet style. The Fullet style is probably my favorite ice out there. I love that nugget style ice. It's cool because you can chew on it, and yeah, it's great. Hopefully that answers your question. Have I replaced the header metering devices on carrier train in one of my videos? No, I just changed the evaporator in one of my videos right now where I replaced the metering device. But I've never changed the actual metering device by itself. Best leak detector for refrigeration. Jonathan, someone asked me that earlier. I personally have the Inficon Stratus on my van and the Fieldpiece SLR8. That's what I couldn't remember that number earlier. SLR8 leak detector. And both of them, in my opinion, are head-to-head. The Fieldpiece is much cheaper, so you do the math on that one, okay? But I keep them both on my truck. I love them both. They both work great. The Stratus is like $800. The Fieldpiece, I want to say, is somewhere between $400 and $600. I can't remember. But the Fieldpiece is probably my favorite one right now. Absolutely my favorite. Why does oil get logged in that evaporator that had a plugged up metering device? Well, there's a couple things going for it. When you have restricted actuators, you no longer let the right refrigerant velocity leave the evaporator. So you can still pump the refrigerant in, but it's not coming out at the right rate. So naturally, with refrigerant, the oil is going to travel, especially when you have R22, the oil is going to travel into the evaporator, okay? And it's going to make its way back to the compressor too. That's the natural flow of things, okay? The oil makes its way through, it lubricates everything. You can do some things to try to mitigate oil loss in the compressor by keeping a crankcase heater on the compressor. Carrier does not do that. So if you have large off times, like during the off season, where you might shut your system off for months at a time, you definitely want to put some sort of a crankcase heater that can help to prevent refrigerant migration, right? Because what happens with refrigerant migration in the cold climates, the refrigerant's going to migrate to the warmer spot in the system, which might be the evaporator because maybe they're running the furnace or something, right? So if the refrigerant migrates to the evaporator and then the system starts back up, the compressor is going to get a flood of refrigerant, liquid refrigerant, right? And it's actually going to push that oil, flooded start. It's going to push the oil out of the compressor and it's going to log itself in other places in the system. So crankcase heaters can really help to try to prevent some of those flooded starts. Yeah, properly maintaining your systems is the biggest thing. biggest thing. I already answered that question. And, okay, I already answered that one. Why did my customer, or why did we leave that AC running for a year and a half with a plugged up metering device and potentially damage the compressor like you guys saw in my recent video? It's all on the customer. I give the customer a quote. I said, the unit's still operating, but it has a restricted metering device. What do you want to do? And they don't approve the quote. I'm not going to go shut the AC off when it was still running. It was kind of working when I left it, but by the time I came back, it was plugged up completely. So it's all on the customer. Document everything. Leave it on them. Let's see what else we got in here. Let's see. Is your wives and girlfriends alcoholics because you're AC guys, or is it just you? Flip-flop tan lines. That's a good question. You know, my wife and I actually did a series, and we need to kind of revisit that series called How We Live the HVACR Life, where we talked about the struggles. Being married to an HVACR service technician, especially a refrigeration guy, I could only imagine is a difficult thing because unless your wife or your partner is completely on board, your spouse, whatever it is, completely on board with the fact that you're going to be working a lot during the summertime, you know, you're not going to be able to take vacations, different stuff like that, that could make people upset. So communication is the biggest key that my wife and I have found works best for us. I keep my wife in the loop. I let her know, hey, I'm going to work late tonight. Hey, this call came in. I got to go take it. I don't have a choice, you know. In all fairness, my wife grew up in the trade with me, okay? My wife and I have been dating since high school. We started dating when I was 17, I think, and she was 16. And then we got married after high school. So she's only known HVAC, and she's known my entire career, you know, how this works. So she's just basically grew up in the trade with me. But yeah, go check out that series on my channel called How We Live the HVACR Life. There's a bunch of different videos on there where we talk about my depression, mental struggles, different stuff like that, mistakes that I made. Let me see what else we got in here. All right. Block of ice and a fan as an air conditioner. Your wife hates that you're in this field. You know, I mean, this year was kind of, every year this happens, but every year I encourage my wife and my kids to go on vacation without me. And they did it this year too. This year they didn't go for as long. A couple years ago, they spent like 3 weeks. They went, actually, I was so envious of them. My wife and my daughters, I have 2 daughters, and they all went to Washington, D.C. They went through all the battlefields. They went and stayed in Virginia. They stayed in North Carolina. They went and did all that stuff. And I was so happy that they got away because it was a crazy summer for me. But those are things that we try to do. I try to encourage them to pick a weekend during the summer, take a really nice vacation, go without me, go spend some time. So this year, my wife went up to her dad's house in Sacramento just for about 4 days. 5 days, something like that, spend some time up there. So I always encourage them to go on a vacation in the summer. And then I try to do at least one vacation with them. So for 4th of July, I took 1 day off work and we made the best of a 3-day weekend. So we were gone for 4 days. We went and rented a little cabin and, you know, spent the 4th of July. So I try to spend time with them when I can, for sure. Let me see what else we got. Vlad, again, the Coke nose is coming in strong, huh? Thanks so much for that super chat, bud. Let me see what else we got. Yeah, the wife has to be on board 100%. So let me see what else we got in here. Guys, if there's a hard start on a bad compressor, do I put a hard start on the new compressor? Not necessarily, Joshua. It just depends. If the manufacturer requires a hard start kit, I prefer not a hard start kit, but oftentimes if you go to the Copla mobile app, they'll actually recommend the OEM specific starting components. On a lot of air conditioning compressors, they'll offer a start cap, a relay. It's better than a hard start kit, okay? Because a hard starts kit's kind of a universal start cap. So if at all possible, you want to lean on the manufacturer to find out if they have factory recommended starting components. But if you replace a compressor, you don't necessarily have to put a hard start on it. You need to evaluate whether or not the compressor is operating properly and go from there. Guys, I'm running out of steam. I don't really have much voice left, and I'm going to end up losing it from talking too much. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I really, really do appreciate you guys. These super chats tonight, holy moly, thank you so very much. You guys have been amazing. It's awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you for the support. I'm so humbled. Remember, if you guys have questions that I didn't answer, send them to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Keep in mind that I do live streams, obviously Monday evening, same time, same bat channel every single week. Same bat time, same bat channel. And then also I go live on the HVAC Overtime channel with my buddies, Adam, Joe, and Bill. Friday evenings about 6:05 p.m. Pacific. There should be a link in the show notes to the HVAC Overtime YouTube channel. Go subscribe and check it out, guys. And if you haven't already, check out the 100th episode. Sit back, grab a beer, and prepare to laugh because it's hilarious, okay? I am going to cue up the outro music, and we're going to wrap this one up. And we will see you guys on the next one. We're going to interrupt that music because I do want to cover one thing that I forgot to address. Nightmare in Action brought up a good point about the IP address on my recent video. So on my recent video where I had a walk-in freezer that wasn't working, I showed the IP address. Guys, that restaurant has no outside communication to that controller, nor will it ever. So showing the IP address goes nowhere. The only reason why there's an IP address is because that's the protocol that the controller uses for me to access it, is I type in an IP address on the controller. So I hooked up via a smart Wi-Fi tool. It has no internet connection. So I took a patch cable from the controller, plugged it into my Wi-Fi broadcasting device, picked up the Wi-Fi signal with my computer, logged in via the IP address, and did everything I needed to. But there's no way anybody can access that on that system. It's not connected to that Wi-Fi service tool, and it is not connected to their network whatsoever. So there's no worries on doing that. And that's all I have to say about that. So I'm going to go ahead and cue this back out, and we're going to go ahead and continue on with the cool outro music.